House Road.
It's one of the tables of
Yeah.
So Ken, did you have a good birthday?
I did, thank you.
Oh, good.
He's joined us.
29?
The big 2-9.
Again.
Morning.
Come on over. Come on, you can. Don't be shy. That way Paul can ask you questions.
Well, actually, I got lots of good recommendations I've got from residents, so I'm very pleased. Should we get also Rich Fund?
Yeah. Where are you? Are you coming in here for a work session? You got it. Victor's on his way. Rich is in a meeting.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And you wanted Garrett too?
Yeah, I wanted Garrett, and then we
I
can
just
start.
texted him. You should be coming. We just on South Carolina. He just texted me.
He threw you to the fire.
We could have a special meeting. It's after
No,
10:30.
not yet.
Oh, no, oh, okay.
Do you think I should, well, actually, should wait until Victor comes? I wanted to mention for the March 28th meeting, I asked if we could start that meeting at 8
At
PM
8.
instead of 7:30.
Right.
Everybody said yes.
That's fine.
Could we mention that?
Sure.
You know, on the agenda.
Oh.
Just say we're changing the time.
You know, twos and zeros, and one cents. So that's not important.
Today?
Just turned 5 on 14.
Today?
Yeah, Wednesday, yeah. Got all these townships on Thursday.
Yeah, we're-
That's right.
Garrett and Victor.
Rivalry's good.
Makes the team.
Yes.
That's great color.
It pops out at you.
Yeah, it does. It's good.
Right, and
The
you get a metal, you know, like aluminum.
Yeah.
The country last weekend? No, this was a little while back, but.
Anything with
Down
that.
at Fitz. And the jagged thing, so we got cut it.
I wanted to mention while we're waiting, with the mail service, I had a meeting with Senator Schumer's regional administrator and with the regional administrator of the Greenburgh, Westchester Post Office, and they have made some changes since we started lodging the complaints. They changed postmasters. They're going to be giving the local postmasters more authority for temporary and permanent hiring. And they're going to try hiring more local people from the post office. And I got an email, because I've been emailing the unions, So the APWU is a major union that represents a lot of the postal carriers, and they're going to meet me on Monday. So I think that the service is starting to gradually improve. I'm still getting maybe one complaint a day from people, 1 or 2 complaints a day, but it's not like hundreds of complaints like I got a month ago. So, I'm optimistic that the service will improve, and both Nita Lowy's office and Schumer's office has been working pretty actively on this. So I guess we probably could start before Garrett gets here.
Yeah.
Good. So basically, the reason I wanted to have this meeting is some residents felt, I was reading various posts on social media right after the storm, that we should analyze what happened during the storm and what could be done better. And what I did is I reached out to other officials and sent out an email blast and came up with a bunch of recommendations and ideas which I wanted to share with the board and the community and the commissioner and Aaron, if you have any building inspector, if you have any thoughts, you could, or any board member has any thoughts, you could mention them, and I could always make changes before I refer these recommendations to the Public Service Commission. I'm going to send it to the Public Service Commission, the governor, all the state legislators from Westchester, the county executive, and members of Congress and other municipal officials. And I think that there's a bunch of ideas that some of them could really help improve conditions, so we'll minimize the possibility of quality of life disruptions after the next major storm and power outages. So the first thing is trees. And Greenburgh has had a team dedicated to tree trimming and removal of trees for many years, I'd say probably about 10 years or so. And we have our own budget for tree removal. I think it's like around $160,000 or something in that neighborhood. And it seems like our town, although we've had outages, did better than other communities that aren't as aggressive in terms of tree clearing. So one of the I broke this up into categories, but many people who emailed me felt more aggressive attention with tree pruning around power lines, dead and alive near wires, proactive trimming of trees so that they do not blow over. However, Aaron mentioned that if we top a tree, it's not a recommended practice. Any reason for that?
Yes, topping of trees no longer a recommended practice because it leads, the tree can't heal off the wound left from a topping cut, so it eventually starts to rot out from the top down, and then you have a future hazardous condition on your hands. So it's no longer a recommended practice.
So,
there are other practices for reducing the height and shape of trees, but it takes certainly professionals to do jobs like that. It's not always the easiest task.
What about when Con Edison comes along and just kind of cuts out around the wires?
Right. That's been an ongoing issue for many years and in many communities. It can lead to, obviously, as you've seen, deformed trees or structurally unstable trees. We've had good communication with Con Edison over the past in terms of trying to get away from that. We've also, on our end, tried to plant and promote the planting of suitable trees,
right.
The right tree, right place. We had a demonstration planting at the town of Greenburgh Library where we planted 12 trees that are suitable for planting underneath the wires, and we put out education to the community on that. So I think we're moving in that direction.
and you did it on Ridge Road near Heatherdale Road.
We did.
They kind of cut the trees. This was, how many years ago?
About 10
years old?
10 years ago. Yeah.
And then they replaced it with smaller trees that don't go up to the wires. So that was a good suggestion. a former editor of the Journal News wrote a piece suggesting that Con Ed begin an aggressive program to remove every tree in a utility right-of-way. But as Aaron pointed out to me last night, there'd be community character issues relating to that. So there's really pluses and minuses to every recommendation, but I think that at least outlining them gives everybody a chance to analyze it. But I like your idea of replacing trees that are cut with low-rising trees. The other issue is encourage property owners to take down trees near the right-of-way. And you said the downside is differentiating between trees to remain, and if there's liability issues.
So, right, I mean, we can certainly educate property owners on, having their trees looked at, typically on an annual basis or after major storms. That's the typical arboricultural recommendations. But the town taking a position on whether or not you have to remove this tree or you do not have to remove this tree because it appears to be in good condition could create liability issues.
Now, the question is, let's say a neighbor complains and they say a tree is unsafe and it's facing my window and I'm panicking that the tree is going to fall and kill me or somebody in my family. Does the town have any ability to force the removal of the tree?
So currently, we do not, under the town's ordinances. Through myself and our legal department, we've come up with recommendations for folks in that type of situation. So when a call or an email comes into our office currently about a concern about a tree on a neighboring property potentially threatening someone else's property, we provide those recommendations, which involve putting the property owner on notice through a letter sent by certified mail with photographs and/or an arborist report, if one's been made available, outlining the condition of the tree and its hazardous nature, asking that homeowner take a look into it and take corrective action immediately to eliminate any threat, and also, potentially offering to share in the cost of the tree's removal, if it's in fact a hazard. And then thirdly, we recommend that, if the neighbor's just not cooperative at all, either by receipt of the letter or working out a compromise to share the cost, that somebody could always look into contacting a land use attorney for more information on how they might be able to proceed.
So we're recommending that the neighbor send that type of letter?
Correct. Correct. And they can copy the town, and I have records where we've been copied just to hold it, but we don't actually issue that type.
But, one of the thoughts, one of the recommendations from, residents was that perhaps Con Ed or New York State could provide financial help to those owners that have trees that are in danger of, falling. I mean, this is just one other option that could make it easier, because we get this all the time. We do get it all the time, and sometimes people are panicking, and our hands are, are tied. One of the recommendations I'm making is that the town, Con Ed, and neighborhood associations should conduct annual walking tours, and people could point out, say to you, what trees are in danger of falling, what they think is in danger of falling. You can take a look, and this way, it's just another way of
Paul?
providing.
I would be concerned about that, because what happens, because we have an arborist that checks the trees in the parks, and there are sometimes you can't tell from the outside because the tree is rotting from the inside, and unless you are somebody who is knowledgeable, you don't know how to point those out. So the average person can't necessarily do that.
Somebody had said that there's sonic technology to test the hollowness of trees. Is that?
There is technology to test, certainly.
always mean that tree's going to fall.
Right. I mean, it's a health and structural stability. I mean, it's really hard to manage.
My feeling is
Mother
that
Nature and severe
I
storms.
feel that there's no way we're going to be able to prevent every tree from coming down.
No.
But I sort of feel that sometimes, residents might be able to say, you know what, this is a tree that, and, there's a million trees around town, you're never going to be able to inspect every one. But I feel that there may be people in the community who have some concerns, and if they would, reach out to us, you could give them an honest, opinion, and if it turns out without committing that it's safe or not safe, and this way, Con Ed or, if you think.
But are we
it's-
doing that on people's property, or are we doing it on town property?
So
This could be on the town right away, not talking about
On the
the
town
town
right
right
So,
away.
yeah, currently, that's kind of how the town proceeds. So, usually I get the calls or they go into DPW, but, hey, Mr. Schmidt, there's a tree that we believe, or I believe is in the town right of way. It's not looking that great. Can somebody come take a look? I'm not sure if it's mine or the town's, so I forward that off to DPW. They write up a ticket for the foreman, who goes out or sends a crewman out to inspect or measure the right-of-way. That lets us determine if it's a town tree or the neighbor's private tree. If it's in the town right-of-way, then the foreman or the arborist goes out to inspect that tree and makes a determination. So all those calls coming in are followed up upon.
I was
right
gonna
now,
say-
Currently,
Yeah,
we have that in place.
I was going to say, certainly the Civic Association in my neighborhood has sent, follows that procedure, and it has gone quite well. The Department of Public Works and the arborist staff are very responsive, and they come out and do exactly what Aaron just described. So I think that is what's going on in the town right now.
If I could
But
say
some
something.
neighborhoods may not be doing it, other neighborhoods
Mm-hmm.
may be more active, so.
If I could say something more on a global scale rather than specific to Greenburgh, because, I've worked here, worked in other communities, and it's interesting right now that you're getting in letters about cutting trees, and cutting trees. I do recall that when a utility company wanted to go and clear trees from the right-of-way, they were told no. Communities throughout Westchester started developing all sorts of ordinances and laws to prevent the utility companies from trimming their trees. There were penalties, there were fines, there were all sorts of hoops and barrels that the utility companies had to go through to remove trees. Now we hear people saying we want all the trees removed. What we have to understand is that, especially like this storm, is a large windstorm. You could trim a tree, but if the ground is saturated, which it was due to the warmer weather we've had and the very wet weather we had, notice the number of trees. It's not that the branches fell, the trees were uprooted. And a tree could be 75, 80 feet tall. So we're going to go into people's property 80, 90, 100 feet and start clear cutting everything away to remove trees. I think it's real important to understand what needs to be done is what we've been doing. We've had our community, I think, could set the tone. We've had a very active tree program. We have arborists. I have an arborist on staff. The Recreation Department has an arborist on staff. We, in Greenburgh, due to our size, are very unique. We have an actual full-time licensed arborist, tree climber, tree cutting crew that every day is out looking at trees throughout all of the community, not neighborhood specific, the entire community. We're out looking at trees. We're removing trees. We're trimming trees, all in an effort to improve the community to the extent that we can. The utilities have an annual program where they're doing that as well. So I think it's important that we make recommendations. If I could say any recommendation should come from this, is that if there is a way for more communities to adopt that active, a proactive approach, but you're not going to stop a tree from falling. Whether the tree is hollow, it could still live for many, many years because, the structural part of the tree may be on the outside. It's the rooting system. There's so much to trees, the health of trees, and the other problem with constantly like trimming trees, you see people might trim the trees all the way up, they want to remove the branches. Now you've done is you've created a very high canopy, which is great for the wind to grab, and it's creating almost like a sail effect. So there really isn't one specific answer that you can do really to help it. I think we have to try to understand where that balance is between a healthy tree canopy in a community, which is a tremendous asset to the community, and at the same time trying to balance the needs to provide power reliably. And I think that, it's great. I think these are some good and positive ideas. We just have to be careful about how far do you want to go.
No, I realize that.
And of course, that the liability aspect with trees is tremendous, and we have to be very astute and aware of how the community might want to identify, because what qualifications does one have, and then what actions are we going to have before us. And you have to remember that all of this comes at a cost. And we don't want our utility costs to go up, we don't want our taxes to go up, so where's the money going to come from? If we can't raise taxes to pay for it, and if the utilities can't seem to raise money to do this, how are we going to do it?
Well,
So, I just want to kind of frame it, because I think it's great ideas, but I've seen, in the cycles that come and go, there's always a concern. And I think we need to respond to those concerns, but we have to temper it a little bit.
I'm sorry.
No, there's one other point too, Paul, because you don't want to remove too many trees, because if you do that, then you can have flooding problems, because the trees keep, they absorb the water and that, so there's that whole balance of things. So we really need to make sure we're not upsetting it. I understand why people are upset, and we need to be cautious about trees, but trees are really wonderful for the community. It's one of the
Right.
things, right? Keep the green in Greenburgh.
But I think that's why I think this is a good, discussion, because there's no, there's no definite answers. Everything has pluses and minuses.
Yes.
And the community basically has to balance and weigh both sides of every action we take. One person, last night, he emailed me, and he thought that Con Ed should look at post-storm data on the tree damages. He said, we're spending millions each year on trimming trees. Has that been effective? What causes the majority of outages, and what takes the longest restoration time? Is it falling branches or entire large trees, falling, or root systems that are dead? Maybe funds should be directed to areas that have the largest impact. So that's something that Con Ed could possibly.
And that sounds positive, because that's a data-driven approach, and I think that's really what anything needs. We know that through the years since, I guess it was Sandy and other things, the local utility company has invested quite a bit of money as far as trying to add more looping to their system, add some type of switches, so that if there is a tree that comes down or a power line filled, that the power is able to reroute. I've gone to a number of seminars where Con Ed has demonstrated some of this newer technology. I think that's the important thing, is we really can't say, I agree that any power out for any time is difficult for anybody, but this could have been potentially a lot worse, perhaps if that infrastructure wasn't there, or perhaps, so again, I think it's data-driven. I think it's a great idea, is looking at, what is the root cause of these failures.
Well, the data's important
No pun intended.
because
Actually, it was.
Thank you.
tracking the
That's a good
storm,
one.
tracking the storms are important.
Yes.
Where they're coming from, because that could
Right.
hit a different part of the town, on a hilly section or so. There's a lot that goes into it, and I think their technology is getting better, but we're not where we want to be yet.
So in terms of the poles, have there, somebody complained about the quality of the Con Ed poles? Has that been a problem to your knowledge?
The biggest problem that everyone sees with the utility poles
Double
is
poles.
what's known as double woods, where you
Or
have
triple.
or triple, and even crazier things. Where a utility, for instance, after a storm such as this, Con Edison, as maybe the primary utility owner of the pole, will go in and replace a new pole and string up their wires. And in the meantime, you wait for Verizon, who tends to be the absolute worst out there, goes and starts stringing up wires with ropes and leaves things hanging and never gets anything done. So we have a tremendous, tremendous problem with the lack of attention by other utilities other than Con Edison on the double woods. And I think that is an absolute awful thing. And anybody drives through this community and other communities see the mess that Verizon leaves behind because they refuse to do anything with their system. And it's just absolute awful.
But has that impacted the outages?
I think how it may have impacted outages, who knows how many wires are hanging on a utility pole that no longer being used, and they're just hanging there.
Right.
And I could use my own neighborhood where I live. There are wires that have been disconnected years ago and are just left hanging on utility poles. So who knows, if these utility poles weren't overburdened with excess wires that are no longer functional, maybe they might be a little bit have less weight on them, and if something hits them, maybe there'll be less inclined to fall. I don't know.
But they look terrible, too.
It is, but, utility poles, they're wood and they do break, but you know, something has to give somewhere when a tree, you know, thousands of pounds hits it, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's good. The next issue was generators. You know, some suggestions, and I think these are good ideas. Con Ed, the state, county might want to negotiate deep discounts for the purchase of generators and could purchase them in bulk. I've suggested in New York State, and this was a suggestion made by Peter Strategas, you know, to me, should offer credits or affordable monthly payments, or make it easier for people to purchase generators, because a good, you know, quality generator could be as much as $14,000, $15,000, and it's unaffordable for some people. Con Ed could offer a service to customers installing generators, maintaining them during outages. This could be helpful for seniors. Con Ed may want to assist homeowners with installing exterior receptacles and the other wiring needed to safely run the generator. They usually require a licensed electrician to do the work. I mean, I think that makes sense, because there's always going to be outages. If there's an outage, it's going to take, if there's thousands of trees, it's going to take 3 or 4 days. There's no way they're going to be able to restore all the power in one day, right?
But Paul, also, you need to know what the setback requirements are and whether or not your property can handle one, so that needs to be given to homeowners as well, because they may think that they can put a generator on their property, but maybe they can't.
Yeah, setbacks, we really don't usually get involved with the setbacks with them, but we do want to know where it's going on the property, so it's not a nuisance to neighbors, and also not threatening to themselves, because there's a lot of safety issues with generators as far as giving off carbon monoxide.
Right.
If it gets into the house, it could be dangerous. We do look at it as far as where it is on the property, and to make
But if
sure
you have a
that-
smaller house and, you know, smaller piece of property, and now you've got slope and different things like that, it could create a problem.
As far as
As far as where do you put it, and how do you keep from having those issues, so that you
well,
don't...
that's why we take permits and look at it to make
Right,
sure.
but I think that maybe
it is-
homeowners need to, that in his checklist, that should be part of it, I would think, Paul.
So it's a permitted process. People just can't get a generator and hook it up.
No,
no.
they can't. You can get portable generators and run extension cords if that helps at all, but that wouldn't require a
Right.
permit.
Well, that's a very dangerous
That's a
scenario.
dangerous
Yeah.
scenario, but
Okay.
they
That's
can
not
do it.
recommended.
you know.
Okay.
I would not recommend that to anybody.
Well, I mean, we
Well,
don't
if the
want to do
power's out,
something
where are you going to
worse.
plug in the extension cord?
Well, into the generator. You can get portable generators.
Oh, I see what you
gas-powered,
mean. Okay, oh,
gasoline-powered
yes, yes, yes,
generators.
okay, running from the,
Yeah.
okay.
It's so dangerous.
But those,
Very dangerous.
I don't recommend them, but
And
they
they
are
put it in
allowed.
the garage.
They're legal?
Yeah,
They're
it's in
legal?
the garage.
They are legal and they are allowed. If anybody does that, I suggest that they would get a transfer switch and do it the right way. But I recommend the stationary permanent mounted generators.
So basically, the ones that we're talking about, people were saying, there's less expensive ones that are about $400 to $1,300 each, and they power refrigerators, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, refrigerators, heat,
But those are the ones that people have to be careful about.
Yes, it's very important that they do it properly and hire a licensed electrician to give
Sure.
the right hookups. Otherwise, the backfeeding the house could be a fire hazard. It could be a very dangerous scenario. And not only that, they could send the power back out to the Con Ed person that's working on the pole, and they could be electrocuted if not done properly.
Yeah, one of the,
So the wires they think are dead, what Anthony said, the wires they think are dead are not dead, because one of the homeowners is actually running a generator, and because they don't have a transfer switch, it's actually coming out past the meter, going back out to the street, and that could make for a very bad day. I think as far as generators are concerned, when you hear the price of $15,000 to $20,000, that's for a whole house generator,
Right.
gas, built-in, you know, it could be even more than that if you're, the gas line, first of all, you have to have gas. Otherwise, you have to have a propane tank, and that has its own issues to it. But if you have gas coming in, it may be that the pipe coming in from the street is not sufficient to handle the significant amount of cubic feet that it takes to run that kind of a generator. So that's a major expense. What about the generators where if you put an outdoor receptacle, that you could take one of these portable generators and then have a transfer switch that actually makes sure that you shut down going to the street and it kicks this in? I think that's the ones they're probably talking about, are $1,500 to $2,000.
Yeah,
something like that.
and that's more in lines with people's budgets, would be this way, and that's exactly how I would recommend it, where they would have the outlet on the outside of the house where they actually pull the
plug it
generator
right
out,
in.
plug it in, and they manually turn the switch, which disconnects the main source going out to the street and just ties it into the circuits that are required or needed to run the house.
In other words, we're doing something similar with municipal buildings. We don't have to have a main generator for every municipal building. If you have an external receptacle that you could plug in,
Right.
one of these that can be brought there, because maybe a building goes down in one location. You don't, every one of the buildings don't have to have a generator unless it's, a warming center or something like that, that you know it's going to be used all the time. However, you could just take the generator and then plug it into another facility or plug it into, but that's all it all has to be done by a licensed electrician, and you have to come in and get the permits. There is no shortcut when it comes to generators, because it's an extremely dangerous, potentially dangerous ordeal, and so what you're trying to do is to, provide heat and light to your house, and at the same time, you may actually be causing a significant hazard to not only the homeowners, but the emergency responders and firefighters should they come to the house. The firefighters coming to the house need to know if you have a generator in there, because they may think an entire area is down, and you have a generator that's running, and it could cause for a very bad day. So,
I think we have waived all the clearance fees and anything like that, and it's really just an expedited building permit.
That's correct.
But one of the things, this is a suggestion from Rich Fun, either the town, Con Ed, or the county could host a day where manufacturers and related professionals could talk about options that homeowners have for units and cost-effective options that they could afford. So we could basically provide residents with information of generators, the installation, and the safety risks. In fact, I was thinking this could be an interesting project for the summer for the student interns to organize more like an information, seminar on generators, because that every year there's going to be at least probably one major outage, and a generator is something that may be an option for some people, but they should really know what that is. So I love this idea. Yeah, so we'll make that an internship, project. Another issue that people were talking about was placing wires underground. Con Ed said it costs about $1 million a mile. The question I the suggestion I had was that perhaps this could be a federal, state, county, and local initiative with homeowners in selected areas where they want it contributing. So let's say there's a neighborhood that always has trees out, and people just said, I just can't take it. If there'd be a shared expense, it might be more affordable. Another question I have is, we do some work underground. We're looking at a water transfer state, changing the water hookups. When we're working underground on that, could we have Con Ed also put the wires underground at the same time? If there's like a water main.
Well, I think the idea of burying wires is again, it's very positive. There are some, there's not only the aesthetic benefits, as you know, in many of the villages, the wires have been buried, and they're done as part of a planning where you're going to go and, you use the word beautify your downtown, and it's been very effective for the aesthetic purposes. I think that maybe collectively we could work with the utilities to understand maybe there are certain transmission lines or whatever terminology they have for burying lines. It's very true, you don't want to actually place an electric line or another utility in the same trench as your water or other utilities for reasons, especially if we ever have to go back and repair them. There's always the impact and the potential of damaging those utilities. That's a very, very, very big, big problem in the utility industry is making sure that other utilities nearby are not damaged when you're going to do one repair. And the other thing is also, you understand that when there's electric lines, depending on how and what techniques are used to bury, there can be fields, electric fields around those, and they can have interference with other utilities. So it's
So that doesn't make sense.
that doesn't so much, but what does make sense is the ability to work cooperatively. For instance, if we were installing sidewalks, and just to throw, say, Road A might be a state road that maybe we want to work with state and get a sidewalk and curbs to be installed, that might be an opportunity to say, all right, well, look, if we're doing some of the excavation, perhaps utility companies with a little bit of financing from, other ways might be able to take some of their transmission lines or more direct routes and use that opportunity. So I think, again, burying utilities is something that should always be looked at, and there might be options. I wouldn't want to do it in the same trench as water lines, but if there could be projects where collectively excavation is done, that might be a positive for the community.
I think in Portchester, they were looking, in Portchester, they were looking at certain parts of the city to do this also right now.
Yeah, it's usually done in some of the downtowns. It's done as part of an economic development or economic incentive to try to remove some of that clutter.
Isn't it also true that if you're doing an excavation, in a 400-foot stretch on a road that's 3 miles long, you can't just bury the utilities in the 400-foot stretch. You have to bury the utility along the whole road. So it becomes a larger project, a more costly project. It's not as easy as it would seem to just bury the wires in the, wherever you're doing your excavation, right?
Definitely correct.
Yeah.
This is, well, there will be some that say it's simply just dig a trench and stick wire in it. They're on it. You're 100% correct. There's way more involved with it. And that's why the costs are where they are, because there's so many other factors that have to be brought into it. Simply digging a hole and putting the wire in is the least of it.
Yeah.
So the $1 million, a mile that they're saying is...
It's just for them.
Accurate?
Yeah, I've heard that number used in multiple discussions when I've been involved in this types of community actions.
But we also have the Cablevision, Fios, they're all on the poles.
Right.
We have the company for the cell phones, put the boxes on the poles. So,
And then the
we're
other-
talking about electric going underground, but there's how many utilities and other, even emergency services and street lighting, and there's just a host of other things that
Exactly.
go
And
into
then
it.
the other little piece to it also that is not noted, and it's sometimes a cost that comes up, is, well, you might be able to get over all these various humps and install those wires. Then we still have, in the transportation, we'll say the last mile, if you will. Meaning, a home right now has a utility wire strung from a pole, reaching across their property, going to a weatherhead fixture, dropping down the outside of their house and going into their home. Well, if the wires in the street are buried, what's going to happen to that wire going across your property? How are you going to get electricity now? So now you need to have a cooperation with the homeowners, so we're going to have to bring in electricians, bring in excavators, and bury their utility lines and connect into. So it does get expensive as well, because there's the whole issue about the actual service going into somebody's home.
Okay. Next, some people suggested that Con Ed should let people know what's happening. Crews should have GPS, and Con Ed website should show where all the crews are during restoration. Con Ed should also on their website highlight where they anticipate they will be going next and anticipated schedule for restoration. A lot of people were concerned about the lack of communication, and people just don't know where they are. So that was another suggestion. I also think that one of the things that Con Ed should do is be required to reimburse customers, at least those who experience outages for more than 2 days with hotels and eating expenses. Some people are luckier than others, and some people get service restored almost immediately or don't have the outages, but other people were spending thousands of dollars on hotels, and it's just really not fair, even if their insurance pays for it. The insurance will get you, if you put in an insurance claim, you'll have to pay later. The thoughts were maybe they could have a graduated reimbursement policy, so if you're out for 5 days, you get this amount. If you're out for 4 days, you get that amount. 3 days, it's less. 2 days, it's less. So the people who are suffering the most would would get the most. Another comment that people made was how many crews did Con Ed have 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and now? Have they cut too many? And what would be the cost of replacing the crews? You know, people, I think Con Ed was prepared in the past, like 30 years ago, for emergencies, but people were complaining that they had too many employees. Now, they're not prepared for the emergencies. So if we want if we want Con Ed to do a better job, we have to give them the tools to do the better job, and that's going to cost money.
Exactly. I think there's no easy answer, as you can see.
Right. There's just a few more, better communications and more accurate information. Con Ed phoned residents during the storm advising that power was on when it was off. Some people had gone to hotels, left the hotels after they got robocalls, went home, power was not back on, and they lost a hotel room to another powerless resident. How does Con Ed keep track of the progress, and how do they report that progress within their organization and externally to the public? And how do they formulate estimates of how long someone should be without power, and how reliable is the estimate? One of the big problems with this storm was Con Ed did not provide anybody with the local officials and the police, fire, DPW with up-to-date information on where they are at what time. That was a big problem, right?
Yeah, I think we'll have to say that their idea of keeping what they call a liaison, is their municipal liaison program, has been very positive, and that's something that was learned through post-storm discussions where the utility company met with municipal officials, we'll call almost some boots on the ground style, and developed a program where they are able, Con Edison is able to dedicate a specific person, a resource to a local EOC, and helps to understand local specific issues, and has been a very, very instrumental in coordinating response. The idea is that they wanted to make sure that important local issues were addressed quickly, and what we found is that it's been very effective for us, where we are able to team some of our crews with a utility crew, because there's always a trade-off of the tree removals or whatever issue might be there, because the Con Ed crews may be trained in doing one aspect, but they're not going to be doing making sure the road is safe to get through. So it's been working very, very well. The other thought is I think Con Edison providing more information is they've tried creating that website. That's something that they've created after some of the past events where they were trying to show outage maps. I think knowing from where we are locally with our water utility, how we have meters that are now are able to almost communicate with us. The meters do send out their readings so that we no longer have to have somebody going to door and reading. I know the utility companies are developing what they call smart meters, and I think that might be a tremendous step forward for the utility company, because they might be able to pinpoint homes that have no power and have a much more accurate information. So even though they might say we repaired the transmission line on your street, maybe there might still be a problem to that home, so somebody won't get the text coming to their home saying your power should be restored, because there might be a much more localized problem that maybe missed the data network of Con Ed. So potentially, if the utility company Con Ed is going forward with any type of new metering technology, that might be a real benefit to help them communicate with residents.
They just started installing the smart meters in my neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
They're actually there today on the street.
That's great.
Yeah, so I'm just using, I know from what
Yeah.
we've been able to do with the water, where we're able to identify, be clue that there might be a potential leak, because we know water is flowing through the meters. It's kind of similar with the electric, I assume.
That must be something they just started, because it wasn't too many months ago that I had a new meter installed, and I was surprised to see the person, coming up the driveway and taking a reading.
Yeah.
I would have thought that we would have advanced past that.
Yeah, I've heard that it's starting, and I guess, Councilman Morgan noted it's in his neighborhood, so. Yeah.
Are they replacing meetings, or is it?
Yeah, they're putting new smart meters on. They sent out a postcard, said we'll be in your neighborhood within the next few weeks, and
right.
today they started.
No more estimated bills?
No more. No more trucking through the snow and trying to see the meter.
That's good.
Yeah, another suggestion people made, kind of changing listing the cell phones and robocall impacted customers via cell phones, providing them with up-to-date information because the landlines aren't working, but the cell phones
Okay.
don't.